but it felt much longer. Then came something nobody expected. The crowd erupted into applause. Not polite applause, not the restrained kind expected at royal gatherings. This was loud, emotional, and impossible to ignore. The reaction shattered the atmosphere of control that had surrounded the evening from the very beginning. What made the moment even more remarkable was that the palace's version of events began falling apart almost immediately. Earlier that day, reports suggested that Diana's archives were effectively being surrendered and folded into a narrative the institution could manage. Yet, in front of everyone, evidence emerged showing that the documents had already been moved into a legally. And what happened next felt less like a royal event and more like one of those moments people talk about for decades afterward. Imagine the scene for a second. A grand hall filled with ambassadors, charity leaders, journalists, aristocrats, and guests who had spent their lives mastering the art of staying calm in public. Everything was supposed to follow the familiar royal script. Smiles would be exchanged, speeches would be delivered, and another carefully managed chapter of history would be presented to the world. But that isn't what unfolded. Instead, millions listened as a dramatic silence settled over the room. It lasted only a heartbeat, protected sovereign trust beyond the crown's reach. Suddenly, the story being told outside the hall no longer matched the reality inside it. The gala had been presented as an evening of unity and healing, but Diana's own writings from 1997 painted a very different picture. They described fears that her memory could one day be softened, reshaped, or gradually erased. As those words reached the public, the contrast became impossible to miss. At the center of the storm sat Queen Camilla, facing a situation no carefully prepared statement could fix. Around her, generations of royal authority seemed to be colliding with something far more powerful already expected. But what happened when Charles Spencer stepped up to the podium and changed the entire mood of the room? Why did a night designed for certainty suddenly become one that nobody could stop talking about? Let's uncover the astonishing details. Charles Spencer's shocking royal speech. Have you ever seen a moment when everyone was certain they knew what would happen next, only for events to take a completely unexpected turn in an instant? That's exactly what unfolded when Charles Spencer stepped toward the podium during one of the most carefully choreographed royal events anyone could remember. The evening was supposed to be simple. Hundreds of distinguished guests filled the grand hall. Cameras were broadcasting to millions at home, and every word had already been prepared. On the glowing screens stood the official speech, polished, approved, and ready to be delivered. Nothing seemed out of place. Then something strange happened. Just as Charles approached the microphone, Prince William quietly tapped his phone. Not once, but twice. Almost instantly, the screens that had been displaying the prepared remarks went completely dark. At first, the audience assumed it was a minor technical issue. Behind the scenes, however, a storm was erupting. Deep beneath the museum, technicians stared at their monitors in disbelief. Systems that had worked perfectly during weeks of rehearsals suddenly refused to respond. Commands were ignored. Access codes no longer worked. Engineers who had spent months preparing for every possible emergency found themselves locked out of their own. As a shocking public discussion now felt like a family confrontation taking place before the entire world. Before anyone could fully react, the receiver was taken and the voice on the other end was heard by everyone. Gone was the carefully measured tone people associated with royal speeches. What emerged instead sounded urgent and deeply emotional. An order was given to stop everything before further damage was done. But the response that followed was even more remarkable. Standing before the audience, William appeared to draw from years of memories that had never truly faded. His thoughts returned to Balmoral and to that heartbreaking period, intony and untouched by outside influence. Then, almost overnight, everything changed. But what hidden truths lay within those long-buried pages that captivated a room full of dignitaries, journalists, and royals? And why did their release feel less like an ending and more like the start of a story no one could ignore? Let's find out. Embargo lifted. Royals left reeling. The embargo was finally lifted. Just like that, words that had been locked away for years were suddenly free, ready to be read by the entire world. exactly as they were written. No edits, no filters, no palace approval. 1997, when the world watched a young prince walk behind his mother's coffin. He spoke of carrying grief while being expected to remain composed. He recalled long nights at Eton, hearing whispers about Diana's death and facing endless headlines while pretending none of it hurt. Duty had always demanded silence, endurance, and sacrifice. Then came the statement that seemed to cut through decades of pain. With millions listening, William declared that his mother's memory belonged to no institution, no title, and no crown. Her story, he insisted, could never be controlled, and in that moment, everything changed. These words had remained sealed away from public view, protected from scrutinizing. The royal family suddenly faced questions it had never expected to answer. Across Britain and far beyond, viewers sat stunned, wondering how much of what they had been told was actually true. Yet the most dramatic moment was still to come. Inside the grand setting, attention was suddenly drawn to a phone that almost never rang. It was the direct line reserved for the monarch himself. At Buckingham Palace, King Charles III was reportedly following every second of the unfolding broadcast. When the call came through, tension swept across the room. The atmosphere changed instantly. What had begun? What revelation turned the narrative on its head? And why are so many now re-examining clues that had been sitting in plain sight all along? Let's uncover the intriguing details. Royal secrets finally come crashing down. Have you ever witnessed a moment when a long-hidden secret suddenly comes to light, changing everything in an instant? That was the atmosphere surrounding an extraordinary royal drama, as millions watched events unfold, knowing nothing would ever be quite the same again. For years, the palace had worked tirelessly to present a picture of unity, loyalty, and quiet dignity. Many believed that image was unshakable. Then, in what felt like a single breath, cracks began appearing everywhere, and people started looking back at old warnings they had once dismissed. As the revelations spread across television screens, an uncomfortable realization settled in. Some of the claims Princess Diana had made decades earlier seemed to echo through the present with surprising force. The carefully crafted narrative surrounding everyone inside the gala believed they already knew how the story would end. The headlines had practically been written before the event even started. Earlier that day, a carefully timed briefing had found its way into the press, suggesting that the Spencer family was finally preparing to hand over the last remaining pieces of Princess Diana's personal legacy. The message was wrapped in words like healing and unity, making it sound as though a long-running family dispute was about to be peacefully resolved. But what made the situation fascinating was that the public narrative and the private reaction. So, what was supposed to be an elegant royal gala suddenly became the center of a storm no one saw coming. Guests were expecting polite speeches, warm applause, and a night of celebration. Instead, Charles Spencer reportedly delivered remarks so bold and unexpected that the atmosphere changed in an instant. As stunned faces filled the room, all eyes turned toward Queen Camilla, whose reaction quickly became the talk of royal watchers everywhere. Was this a carefully planned message or a moment that revealed deeper tensions behind palace walls? But do you think Charles Spencer intended to send a direct message to the royal family? Or has the story been blown out of proportion? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy uncovering the biggest royal twists, scandals, and behind-the-scenes drama, please subscribe. The gala that changed everything. So, it had been written. The performance was ready. The world was watching. Yet, in royal history, the most dramatic moments rarely come from what is planned. They come from the unexpected twist nobody sees coming. And on this particular night, beneath the glittering surface of royal pageantry, the battle for control of the story was only just beginning. For a moment, it seemed like everything was unfolding exactly as planned, with every detail carefully scripted and every outcome concealed intense concentration. Nothing about his behavior suggested what was about to happen next. The palace believed the evening belonged to them. They had spent nearly 6 months preparing every speech, every camera angle, and every public moment. What they didn't anticipate was that others had spent those same 6 months preparing something of their own. As King Charles moved closer to taking center stage, the atmosphere remained confident. The script termination. As the event drew closer, those efforts intensified. By the time guests arrived and celebrations began, 2 very different narratives were already moving toward the same destination, setting the stage for a confrontation that few anticipated but many would soon remember. The most fascinating part? The person attracting the least attention may have been the one holding the greatest influence. Prince William sat calmly among the guests, showing almost no emotion. To observers, he appeared relaxed, perhaps even detached from the excitement around him. Yet that still documented truth. Cameras captured every reaction, every pause, every expression. By the end of the night, this wasn't simply about public opinion anymore. The legal reality had changed. The released documents could not be sealed away. The archives could not be reclaimed. Neither palace officials, government figures, nor royal lawyers could put them back behind closed doors. For nearly 3 decades, Diana's legacy had been the subject of endless debates, interpretations, and attempts at control. Yet on a night designed to celebrate the monarchy's strength, something unexpected happened. The institution lost its grip on the story, and Diana's voice, once again, became impossible to silence. So, what do you think happened when Charles Spencer delivered a speech so explosive that it reportedly left Camilla stunned at a royal gala? We'd like to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Had quietly secured protections for something far more lasting. Her personal writings, letters, diaries, and private papers. Years later, that overlooked provision suddenly became incredibly important. As guests mingled beneath the lights and conversations filled the room, many believed they were witnessing the final chapter of a long dispute. What they did not realize was that the real story had been written long before the gala began. And when the truth finally emerged, it revealed that the outcome everyone expected was never the outcome being planned at all. Here's something most people missed. The detail that would later shake everything seemed so small it barely earned a second glance. But how did a forgotten decision from 1996 survive for decades, only to resurface at the worst possible moment? And why are some royal insiders convinced it changed far more than anyone realized? Stay with me, because this story gets even more surprising from here. Princess Diana's oversight changed everything. You know what's fascinating? Sometimes the biggest mistakes aren't the dramatic ones everyone notices. Sometimes they're the tiny details people dismiss with a wave of the hand. And in this story, that overlooked detail sat quietly for decades, waiting for the perfect moment to change everything. Back in 1996, while the world, she wanted someone she trusted to remember. And Charles Spencer never forgot. Fast forward nearly 3 decades, and the stage seemed perfectly prepared for a different ending. At a grand gala filled with symbolism, white lilies, flowers strongly associated with Diana, decorated the venue. The atmosphere was carefully crafted around themes of unity, healing, and moving forward. At the center of it all sat Queen Camilla, wearing historic emeralds. Dismissed as a minor technicality, was still there, untouched by time. And the people who once overlooked it were about to discover that some promises, some documents, and some stories refused to disappear, no matter how many years pass. Everything looked perfect on the surface. The smiles were there, the celebrations were in full swing, once linked to earlier generations of royal women. For years, advisors had worked to reshape public perception, presenting her as a steady and enduring figure beside the king. The evening felt like another step in that long effort. Everything appeared under control. Guests chatted politely. Diplomats exchanged smiles. The royal narrative seemed settled. Yet beneath the polished surface lingered something few people in that room fully understood. Long before the gala lights sparkled and the speeches began, a forgotten legal protection had already been set in motion. What many had observed and passed from one generation to the next. The room grew quieter. 500 guests watched. Millions more remained glued to their televisions. The approved script had vanished. The technology was no longer following orders, and a single blue document now held everyone's attention. Whatever Charles Spencer was about to reveal, it was becoming increasingly clear that it was never part of the original plan. Camilla had seen countless royal documents. At the center of it all stood Charles Spencer. He showed no sign of concern, no hesitation, no nervous glance toward the darkened screens. Instead, he calmly reached inside his jacket and pulled out a folded sheet of pale blue paper. That paper immediately caught attention, stamped with the seal of the High Court of Chancery. It carried a significance that went far beyond ceremony. This was not the kind of document associated with criminal disputes or political arguments. It belonged to a world of trusts, inheritances, estates, and legacies, the very things that shape how history is preserved. Own equipment. Panic spread through the control room as alarms flashed and error messages multiplied across the screens. The live broadcast, reaching more than 3 million viewers, continued uninterrupted. What nobody watching from home realized was that a rarely used override protocol had reportedly taken control of the entire system. The only way to stop the transmission would have been to physically shut down power inside the building, an unthinkable move during a televised royal gala. While technicians scrambled for solutions, the audience remained completely unaware that an extraordinary struggle was taking place behind the curtain, and others were paying attention to something far less obvious. Hidden deep within the settlement was a provision that hardly attracted any attention. It wasn't about palaces, jewels, or money. It dealt with something many people considered far less important at the time: personal records, written materials, and ownership of Diana's own story. To most observers, it looked insignificant. To Diana, it was protection. Years later, that decision would prove far more important than anyone imagined. What makes the story even more remarkable was glued to the headlines surrounding Princess Diana's divorce. An entirely different battle was taking place behind closed doors. Palace officials and lawyers were pouring their energy into questions of rank, titles, and royal protocol. The discussion everyone seemed obsessed with was whether Diana would keep certain royal privileges and how history would remember the separation. But while all that noise filled the room, Diana's legal advice is that Diana reportedly spoke about it with her brother, Charles Spencer, during a quiet conversation at Althorpe. She believed there might come a day when others would try to reshape her legacy, polishing some parts, removing others, and fitting her memory into a version of history they preferred. She wanted safeguards in place. More than that, one moment, the gala was moving along exactly as planned. Cameras flashed, conversations flowed, and the carefully crafted image of royal unity seemed untouchable. Then everything changed. The person who changed it wasn't the king, it wasn't the queen consort, it was the man expected to wear the crown one day. Without raising his voice, William walked through the tension that had gripped the room. Palace staff who only moments earlier seemed determined to keep order stepped aside almost instinctively. It was as if years of royal training had taken over. When he finally reached the center of the storm, he revealed something no one expected to see. On a secure device sat a series of confirmations. Messages had already been sent. Major news organizations, including the BBC, the New York Times, and the Washington Post, had received a collection of documents that had remained hidden for decades. There was no way to stop what came next. The countdown had already begun. Yet the real shock wasn't the release itself. It was what's in between disbelief and anticipation, sensing they were witnessing a moment that would be remembered long after the noise had faded. For years, people brushed it off as coincidence, a strange remark, an overlooked moment, nothing more. But what if someone had quietly predicted everything before it unfolded? Why did a room full of powerful guests suddenly fall silent? And what did Prince William do that changed the entire atmosphere without saying very much at all? Let's find out. Prince William's warning finally proven. Wait, are you telling me she saw it coming years before it happened? That was the question racing through everyone's mind as a room packed with powerful guests suddenly fell silent. It caught everyone off guard. Charles didn't sound furious. In fact, his voice was almost gentle, that somehow made it far more unsettling. As the crowd listened, he spoke about memory, about how history often ends up being shaped by those who remain behind to tell it. He reflected on the way painful stories are often polished and softened until the sharp edges disappear. You know those moments when a room goes completely silent, not because nothing is happening, but because everyone suddenly realizes everything is about to change. That was exactly the feeling the instant Camilla noticed the seal on the document resting in Charles's hands. Before a single word was spoken, the color seemed to drain from her face. She recognized it immediately. This wasn't a proposal, a discussion, or a warning. Whatever had been decided was already locked in place. Courts had seen it. Signatures had been made. The door had already closed. What happened next? Documents before. But this one was different. The moment she spotted the seal in Charles's hands, everything changed. So what was in that document that left her visibly shaken? And why did she seem to realize, before anyone spoke, that a decision had already been made and there was no turning back? Let's unravel the details. Camilla frozen by Charles's donation known as the 1997 Heritage Trust. Not under palace control, not under royal historians. And the people overseeing it were not courtiers or advisors. They were William and Harry. The declaration that followed hit the room like a thunderclap. The trust had approved the immediate publication of Diana's final journals without edits or removals. For a second, nobody seemed capable of moving. Then the shock arrived all at once. Conversations died mid-sentence. Chairs scraped against the floor. Gasps echoed across the hall. A glass tipped over, sending water across an immaculate white tablecloth. Yet almost no one noticed. Reporters surged forward. Camera flashes exploded from every direction. And amid the growing chaos, one person remained remarkably calm. William slowly rose from his seat. While security officers called after him and palace aides tried to intervene, he kept moving forward with quiet determination. The crowd watched, froze. Then he turned to someone many in the room thought they already understood, Diana. But this wasn't a story about a princess, a royal icon, or a global celebrity. Charles spoke about a woman who spent countless late nights writing down her thoughts by hand. A woman who recorded heartbreak, happiness, fears, and hopes in private pages never intended for public